Okay, as usual, I'm waiting for my laptop to catch up. Hopefully, it'll do so here shortly. I see we already have somebody on, so that tells me that I'm up and running. But this isn't yet. I don't know why it's so slow. You'd think it'd be almost immediate with these live stream situations, but for some reason or other, it doesn't do it that way. So I'm going to wait. Maybe, like I said before, maybe we can't do the chat if it's not going to cooperate. I wish I could get this particular part set up before I even come on, but that's not possible because you have to see what's happening on the screen. And for some reason or other, mine is just always a little behind schedule. So it looks like maybe we're not going to be able to do it today. I'm not going to waste a lot of time getting it fixed. I'll just check it again in a few minutes. Hopefully you all are seeing it. Whether I see it or not is not that big of an issue unless we get to the chat. And then that might be a problem then. Yeah, it's not going to come up. It's going to be a problem here. Okay, well, we'll just let it go. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. So the chat, I'm going to have to stare into the camera, it looks like, if I do it at all. So let me go ahead and get started. All right. Wow. Well, some things have happened. I thought I better come on. Again, Wednesdays aren't normal for me, especially this time of the day, but I try to wait until everybody else is pretty much done. The Duran, Alexander Mercouris, Alex Christoforou, Judge Napolitano. He hasn't come on yet. I suspect it'll be later this afternoon. Garland Nixon was this morning, but these people come in and out all day. And I wanted to address a few issues, some of which have happened on Twitter. I really shouldn't talk about these because I really just want to put that topic aside for right now. But I'm going to bring something up that happened on Twitter today. So those are the things we're going to talk about. First of all, though, let me get to my shirt. Yes, this is my Harley shirt, and I know it's not quite professional for use when we're doing, YouTube explanations of things, news, whatever. I understand that, but yeah, it's still not going. I can't believe this. Wow. I'm going to check out of this just because I'm curious to see what in the world's going on here. I am live because I see chat on the screen on the phone camera. So let me try one more time and see if I can get this thing to jump start. Because I'd much rather read the chat here than there. Anyway, there we are. Finally. I don't know why that's a problem, but it is. Okay, so my shirt, I know is not professional, but I just felt like wearing I have a whole lot of Harley shirts. Most of them are t-shirts, but I do have this motorcycle shirt. It's not really a Harley shirt, but I don't even own a motorcycle anymore, but I just kind of liked it, so I wanted to wear it today. I've had this shirt for, my wife Carol bought it for me, probably in about 2007. I got somewhere in there, 2006, 2007. I've taken really good care of it, and I think it looks nice for the most part. So here we are. So I'll just get that out of the way so you know that, yeah, I know it doesn't quite fit the situation here, but I wanted to do it anyway. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. And welcome everybody as you come in. Okay, so let's talk about the first subject here. General Fred Flintstone Milley and U.S. bipolar projection. Now, what do I mean by bipolar? Well, I'm not talking about the bipolar world, the multipolar world, as opposed to the unipolar world that the United States and the Anglo-American Alliance, the New World Order is trying to push. That's the unipolar world. We're definitely moving into a multipolar world, and it's really because of the abuses of the United States, not just to its enemies, but to its supposed allies and friends, as we saw with the Nord Stream pipeline, as we've seen with a lot of other situations that the U.S. has been in over the last many decades. It really is moving into the point, and it's our fault. Much like I've mentioned, there are some other things that happened that we've done around the world that have caused people to look at us with a jaundiced eye, and the only thing that's kept them loyal to us is the petrodollar, number one, and the supposed protection that we'd give them, and the economic ability if they remained our allies, which we turn and go against our agreements and plunder them anyway. So all this has been going on over the years. You can only kick your friends in the nuts so many times before they finally say, you know, I'm not going to let you do that anymore. And we're actually seeing that at this point. As I mentioned from the very start of all of my things, the United States has turned into the evil empire. It has become what it accused the Soviet Union of, and it's much worse. Uh, its projection around the world, and I'm not talking about the projection that I'm going to talk about here in a minute, but its projection of power around the world was ostensibly to protect our interests and the interests of our friends, when in reality what it was is to make sure that the United States establishment, the deep state, the administrative state, the people that really control things, along with the New World Order, would be able to occupy countries, which would then be seen as kind of like holding a gun to their head if they didn't cooperate. We're seeing that with Germany and with the Eastern Europe, with the Western European countries now. Germany has just turned to an obvious vassal state of the U.S. With the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline, which is now being talked about, so I can kind of say it very easily now. It's getting out there finally, not just with Seymour Hersh's article, but with all of the other things that are coming up. The one of the officials of China just came out and called for the United States coming clean on this, and that it was a violation of the world order and it was a terrorist act, which it was. We are the world's foremost instigator of terrorist activity. I can go back to the Operation Gladio back in the 70s, for instance. If you don't know what that is, look it up. It was run by NATO, but of course NATO is run by the U.S. And the Red Brigade out of Italy, that was actually NATO people killing Europeans, and then so they could blame it on Russia, the Soviet Union at that time. We know about the same thing with Operation Northwoods when Kennedy was president, where they wanted to essentially destroy the DOD, the Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, along with the intelligence community, wanted to destroy American infrastructure and kill American citizens, American people, in order to justify a war with Cuba, saying that Cuba attacked us. This stuff's been going on a long time. We talk about the USS Maine. A lot of you know about all these things. We could talk about the Gulf of Tonkin to start the Vietnam War. We could talk about, all the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, which never existed there, and Iraq had nothing to do with the attack on the United States on 9/11, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I maintain, of course, that our own people attacked us that day, as they always do, because the American people and the people of particularly Western Europe are really the enemies of their own countries' leadership. They're actually coming after us. They don't want to have to pay the social security nets anymore, the social safety nets anymore. So they had to come up with something to reduce the population, which Trump fell into apparently pretty easily, and not by accident, maybe by design. I do not trust him. I loathe him to this day. And I saw, boy, I'm sure jumping around here a lot, aren't I? But you saw just over the last few days what's been going on with him and his attacks on Ron DeSantis. And I'm not saying Ron DeSantis is a savior or anything like that. I'm just saying there's no loyalty with these people. And they'll say, "Oh, this is just political banter." No, this is uncalled for. This is junior high school, maybe even elementary school name calling, and it's just disgusting. But it's what Trump engages in. But at any rate, there were some other things as well. Trump's still pushing his little, his miracle. He's still calling it his miracle. And on top of that, I saw some posts from some previous Trump loyalists. I wouldn't say that they've totally abandoned him at this point, but they're at least asking the question which I had been asking them to do back 3, 4, even 5 years ago, maybe longer. And now I'm seeing where they're saying, "Oh yeah, Trump did this and Trump did that, and he might be all right, but we're not sure." And I just reminded them this morning that he betrayed you all once, he'll betray you again, and that's what he does. Okay. So anyway, talking all about this, about what the U.S. is up to. So then, we have the situation in Ukraine, and it's obviously going bad for NATO, and particularly for Victoria Nuland. Apparently, it's taking some turns that she didn't like. But what they're really after, as I've always said, is a war to steal from you, to take your blood, to take your money, and to make slaves of you. You understand? that the banks and the banking system, the Federal Reserve, are all looking right now towards what's called a bank uh, 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 bail-in, not a bailout, but a bail-in where they'll use your money. That's people are starting to understand that now, and I've been warning about that for a long time. What's yours is theirs, and what's theirs is theirs. In other words, the government is not your friend. I don't care who you can put up. Any of those people in Congress, with the exception of maybe a handful, I mean the House and the Senate, as I said many times, and they're out there to steal from you and everybody else that they can. So anyway, that's where we are at this point. I have heard some very knowledgeable people talking about the financial system. I'm not a financial guy. I don't pretend to be, and I make that caveat up front. But Cliff High, for instance, if you follow him on Twitter or on his blog, he's been talking about that there are people in the Federal Reserve, maybe not the one in New York, but in some other of the branches, that are starting to see where this is actually going, and that they may be putting up some resistance, and that they might be looking for a way out rather than crashing the entire system. I don't know how that will work, but Cliff High has some. I would say he's on the positive side. He's looking at it like maybe we'll come out of this. We'll have a year or so of difficulty, and then it'll finally right itself. And the goons that are running the Federal Reserve now, and the Department of Treasury, et cetera, will lose in this battle. I don't know that that's true. I couldn't tell you. That's not my area of expertise. But I sure hope that Cliff High is correct about that, even though we're going to go through a situation worse than 2008 for at least a year, apparently, according to him. I'll just refer you to him on all that because I don't know all those particulars. So getting back to Mark Milley, sorry, I like how I like to bring a whole lot of things in and show what's going on. Mark Milley came out. It was part of this whole Allied meeting that they had, where if you read between the lines, Alex Christoforou was very good on explaining that this morning, where if you read between the lines, you can see that they're really saying they can't say publicly that this thing in Ukraine is going to go south for the United States and NATO, but and they got to get us on a war footing with China as soon as they can. To keep all this grifting and all this death and destruction going on, that these people are only, that's all they're good at. They're not good at creating anything anymore good. So we see these statements being made by these leaders, the president of NATO, for instance, Lloyd Austin, and then Mark Milley, talking about things that make and they phrase it so that they're not committed to saying that we're losing. But if you read between the lines, you can definitely see that that's what they're saying, but they're not. They don't want it to go as public verbatim. So Alex Christoforou on YouTube breaks that down pretty well. I'd suggest you listen to him. I'm not going to steal his thunder. But what I am going to say about Mark Milley, since I was a military officer, lieutenant colonel, I know a little bit. I'm not as good as Scott Ritter. I'm not as good. I'm sure as heck not as good as Colonel Douglas McGregor, or some of the other people that have braved making comments on this. Not so much Scott Ritter. I don't think he's a retired guy. I think he's totally out of the military at this point, retired and everything. That's not his situation. So he can speak out very similarly to the way I do, because he's not going to receive retribution under the UCMJ. Douglas McGregor, on the other hand, could be in trouble under the UCMJ if he's not careful. So even when he talks about things, and he does a very good job, I have no complaints about what Colonel McGregor does. As a matter of fact, I consider it outstanding. But then again, I can be in here and I can kind of add a little bit that maybe he can't. And so that's why I'm coming down on Milley right now. So Milley comes out and he says in this, and it made the news, the mainstream news, of course, that Russia is losing strategically, tactically, and politically, and is a pariah in the world. I'll tell you what that is, ladies and gentlemen. That is a sick, psychopathic, sociopathic, bipolar mind with multiple personalities accusing someone else of what they are. I've seen this on a personal level in my own personal life. As I've said many, many times, I'm spot on. I'm razor sharp when it comes to my professional things. I'm kind of weak on my personal areas, especially when it comes to reading women. I'll be honest. I'm very weak there. I think most men are. It's taken me this long to learn, but I learned a few years ago. I started seeing what this is about, and this bipolar thing, this multiple personality, this projection of your own errors onto somebody else is a sign of mental illness at some degree. In small children, it's basically just a lack of maturation. They can get over that as they grow up. But in adults, they've been doing it either so long that it's made them mentally ill in this regard, or they've been mentally ill the whole time. I'm not sure. But in this case with Mark Milley, he's projecting the circumstances that the U.S. and NATO are facing onto Russia, because just a few weeks ago he came out and he said that, you know, the war, Ukraine is in trouble. You know, we better look for some type of a resolution to this, negotiated resolution or whatever with the Russians. And he got caught on that. He got called on it by somebody, obviously somebody in the White House or in the IC, maybe Austin himself. And now he's gone back to this thing that, oh, you know, the Russians are having all these problems. Well, I'm going to tell you that it's just the reverse of what Mark Milley said. And anybody who understands military operations and the state of the lack of the industrial warfare capability of NATO and the United States will tell you the same thing that Douglas McGregor's telling you, Scott Ritter's telling you, and that I'm telling you. And I think that there are some others out there, very few, maybe a handful, that are going to tell you the same thing. So Mark Milley, as I've said, has been an ass. He still is. He talked about he shouldn't have stood with Trump there at the church when it was burning, the St. John's Church. He said that was a mistake, as the military shouldn't be that close to a political situation. Oh, really, Mark Milley? Really? And then you turn around and you call China and tell them that you'll give them a heads up if we're going to attack them. Right. And a lot of other things that you've done. You're an embarrassment. Wearing all those, I've seen pictures of General Eisenhower, you know, the Supreme Allied Commander of Europe in World War II, and he has maybe 6, 8 at the most ribbons on the chest of his jacket. And here's Mark Milley, and he didn't lose a war. Here's Mark Milley, who's lost Afghanistan, you know, this whole debacle in Ukraine, etc. And he's got all the, I mean, he looks like a freaking damn Christmas tree about ready to fall over if he wasn't so damned heavy, so out of the Army's requirements for height and weight standards. If he wasn't so far beyond that, he'd fall over from the weight of those false ribbons he's wearing on his chest. And that brings up another thing. You know, I get attacked. Why am I turning this on me? Just to show you the bipolar nature of this. That's the only reason. Then we'll move on to something else. I get attacked by people because, oh, you only made it to Lieutenant Colonel. Oh, you didn't do this. Oh, you didn't do that. Right? But then you see Mark Milley. Those higher officers, they give each other ribbons as a matter of course. They don't even have to do it. They just get it. I received a lot of attacks because of my personal lifestyle, which, by the way, the Army accepted, as far as they said, well, look, you're not violating any real law, okay? You're definitely not violating military law, even if you have these relationships. So come on back in. You know, we'll give you a gun and a badge, and you can go to work for us. That's after Murray fired me. Well, then all of that comes up, of course, along with, oh, you were never in the Army, or you never were a lieutenant colonel once they found out I was in the Army, or you didn't do this, or you didn't do that. And then when that didn't work, they had to go back to attacking my personal life as it was back in the 80s and early 90s. So at any rate, the point is that they're willing to do that, you see, when their lies are about ready to be exposed. But you notice that when General Petraeus, a 4-star general, again with this huge thing of Christmas tree decorations on his chest, has an affair to a married subordinate officer who was also his biographer, and spills secret and top secret information to her during pillow talk. Oh, he's still the greatest thing in the world. They're still putting him on CNN and all these other places where he gives his professional commentary on the situation that's going on, and he doesn't know jack shit. Colonel McGregor is so far above General Petraeus that it's embarrassing. Those are our generals these days. And that's why I've said you can't trust these general officers, any flag officers anymore. They're political animals only. We don't have any Douglas MacArthur's or Pattons or Eisenhower's anymore, and we haven't for many years. I saw it personally, and it made me disgusted. The Russians do. They may not have been in any really kind of ground combat for years, but they knew what they needed to do, and they kept going after it. And they're about ready, as I said, to totally kick our ass if we make a mistake. Mark Milley is a braggart and a liar. Strategic, tactical, political defeat for the Russians. And they're a pariah. No, they have more respect than we do. And we just heard that Egypt, for instance, is probably going to enter the BRICS. People are dropping the United States. They know the petrodollar's done, which is why those bank bail-ins are important, and you need to understand what's going on. That's not going to be the only place it happens. They're going to attack your pension accounts, etc. Somehow you're going to have to get independent of the system. And then you've got the FBI saying that, oh, did you see this? Oh, New York teachers who refused to get the extant treatment, New York sent their fingerprints to the FBI. Why? Because the FBI now investigates people, not crimes. It interferes with your liberties, doesn't protect them. It's the biggest violator of your liberties in the world today, even more so than the Chinese and Russian intelligence services. Or for that matter, the drug cartels, which are probably a tool of the intelligence community anyway, as I pointed out in the past. For instance, in my documentary I made back in 2011, Mexican Borders, Mexican Drug War or Insurgency. Okay, so we have that with the FBI, and of course they came out with, the FBI came out with, and they're trying to pull away from it, but you can't retract something unless people are held accountable. That's that letter on top of the memo about the Catholics being domestic terrorists essentially because of their beliefs. So they go after one religion, but they support another. What's the other one that they're supporting? I'll just call it wokey. Okay, I think you can read between the lines. If you're wokey, that's their new religion. Like, and then Faustus with his, you got to believe him because you have to believe the science, right? That's religion, ladies and gentlemen. That's not skepticism, and I'm going to hit on that here in another minute on another topic. So anyway, Mark Milley has proven again that the United States is done. Ladies and gentlemen, this thing's going down. Now I'm going to tell you again. We're losing not just because Biden is incompetent or that he's senile. He's had these ideas in his head his entire career. We're in trouble because they want us to be in trouble. See, they want to take down, our own people want to take down the United States. They want to take down the American people, just like they've taken down the European people now. Even attack their infrastructure with a terrorist attack, as Seymour Hersh has pointed out. And people like Lee Smith have been wanting to, who's on Twitter. I could get into details on that, but at least these people are saying, well, Sy's just doing this because he's trying to come after Biden politically. Oh, even if that were true, it doesn't change the facts. And now we've got Russia, right, going to the United Nations saying, look, we want you to investigate this thing of the Nord Stream pipeline. This is not just a terrorist act, but the United States stabbed their own allies in the back and they're destroying their economy so that they can take it over. And again, drop all of the people down to servitude where you have to fall in line and obey the monarchs in a feudal system. As I forget who said it, this wasn't my analysis, and I wish I could remember who I'm quoting here. I think some people have picked this up already. Lavrov, the foreign minister for Russia, has asked the United Nations to look into the Nord Stream pipeline destruction. And that, according to these people that have analyzed this, that are the good guys, they're saying that Lavrov and probably Putin, this is probably their plan, or maybe their Security Council, I'm not sure, has now put the United States and the United Nations in a very interesting position. If the United States objects to this at the UN Security Council, well, let me back up. If it goes to the UN Security Council and they do a proper investigation, they're going to find out that it's going to be revealed that the United States did this, probably in conjunction with assets or political leaders of both the United Kingdom and Norway, if not Germany itself. The German government, which is supposed to protect its own people, doesn't. It violates their trust and their oaths and sells their people down the drain. Does that sound familiar, like another country we know about, that this happens all the time? So that's the first thing. The second thing is if the United States objects, it's going to embarrass the United Nations. In other words, if the United States objects and it doesn't go forward in the investigation, it's going to show that the United Nations is nothing more than a front for the United States, which is funny because how often in the last few decades have you heard, get us, the U.S., out of the United Nations? The whole time we were controlling it. We're so damn deceitful, it's disgusting. We're thieves, liars, and murderers that run our country. Okay. So the Russians have tried to go to the United Nations on several occasions about a lot of things that have happened, and the United States has been able to cancel out by veto and all that stuff. They've tried to use the United Nations. Russians have to enforce the rule of law, not a rules-based order, like the New World Order and WEF and the Anglo-American Alliance wants to push now. No rule of law, but yeah, rules-based government, which is no protection to anybody, much less us as little individuals. But at any rate, so the Russians have got to know at this point that, if they haven't known before, that the United Nations is a front for the United States and the Anglo-American Alliance, and that it's useless to deal with them, and they'll probably pull out, and as they've already started to do, and create another thing somewhere else. I'm not saying that's good. It's too bad that these nations can't get along, but it's all blamed right here. This is the guy right here. This is the bully in the courtyard, in the schoolyard, that does the first punch, and then when you punch back, he's out there crying the blues. Oh, look what you did to me. Okay? No, I don't have any respect for the United States right now. Zero. Even though I served it for 28 years. It's a disgusting disgrace. Look what we've done socially to our people. Encouraging immorality, encouraging these idiotic ideas. Not protecting our children, but instead of helping them through the maturation process, we're telling them to hack off their genitals. I'm getting angry. I saw Scott Ritter get angry this morning when he was doing the same thing, defending Russia. And he's defending Russia because Russia's right in this. They were attacked. We've been setting them up since the 90s, surrounding them, violating our agreements. Then we went into Ukraine. We did the Maidan coup, put in a government that wasn't elected, then went from there and pushed the Ukrainian army, armed it, financed it, pushed it out to where it was bombing and shelling Russian people in the eastern Ukraine and Donbass. And then the Russians said, we got to stop this for two reasons. One, those are our people that they're killing, number one. Number two, once they get there, they're setting up to invade us, probably at Volgograd, that area, not Stalingrad, but I don't know, I forget the name of the city right now. But anyway, going through that area. So it was a preemptive thing on their part. Do I like it? No, I think it's horrible. Donbass is too Russian. It is too, and I'm not going to argue with you here. That's been done. First of all, there are primarily Russian people there. The United States wants to support Kosovo leaving Serbia. Oh, that's okay. But the Donbass can't leave Ukraine? No, that's a double standard, hypocrisy. I'm sorry, okay? Furthermore, they did vote to leave. And we can say all day long that it was a bogus election. But it's funny when we say that there's a bogus election in the United States, you're an election denier and they'll even want to arrest you for it. But these people over there who we know have been Russian affiliated for forever would have voted for this, and we want to say, no, it wasn't valid. We are the election deniers there. We are such hypocrites, it makes me sick to my stomach. I'm ashamed. Damn, you people that say stuff like that. You know, what's wrong with you? And now we're going to send, as Scott Ritter said today, we're telling Germany to send crossed Nazi or German tanks into a Nazi, I shouldn't even say that on here, it'd probably get me in trouble, into a country that supports that ideology, admittedly so, and its ruling people. And we're confronting Russia with the same thing that caused them to lose, 21 million people in World War II? Yeah, Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike. Yeah. I talked about that before in the letter that supposedly he wrote that people are saying he didn't. It didn't matter whether he penned it or not. I can look at that thing and I can tell you that those were the objectives of that organization that he headed. Even if he didn't write the letter, like people say he didn't. But those are the objectives. Okay, so I've talked about Milley, I've talked about all this nonsense. Let's talk about the tactical and strategic situation there right now. And I'm going to show you a picture. This picture, I regret that I was the officer primarily responsible for training a contingent of the Bulgarian army in order to enter NATO. Because that was encroaching again upon, it was violating NATO's agreements not to encroach upon the Russian territory, and also making Bulgaria a NATO country and endangering the Russian security. We wouldn't stand that in Mexico, at least we shouldn't. Of course, with Biden and the people that we got in there now, they just assume we get totally invaded because they've got their bunkers, they've got their mansions all over the world, wherever they're going to hide. But I did, and I want to show you a picture. And this is kind of funny because my grandson, he despite the fact I don't want any of my kids ever being associated with the military, and I caution them and I counsel them against it because of what we've become. We're not defending ourselves anymore. We're not doing that. We're killing off our own people. We're stealing from them, and we're forcing them to kill other people for the same people that are stealing from us. But I was that officer, and I want to show you a picture. This is me with a BMP in Bulgaria when I was evaluating, along with another team from NATO, members of the team from NATO, the Bulgarian army. They had Soviet equipment. And we were told all these years how terrible the Soviets were. I'm not saying that their ideology wasn't bad, because it was. But the fact of the matter was, when we inspected the equipment, now the Bulgarians would have been the first probably to go through the Fulda Gap if that was going to happen, or attack NATO if that was going to happen. And I have my doubts now that the Soviet Union even was ever really intending on doing that. Their equipment wasn't up to standards. These people couldn't even shoot. Well, we got them up to speed. We had them do maintenance on their equipment, get it up to standards, get their training up to standards and all of that. I'll put that up closer so you can see it again. There I am right there, right? So I have authority to speak about what I'm speaking about. The Russians knew that NATO, when Bulgaria came in, not to mention that now they're trying to get NATO, the Georgians and the Moldovans into NATO, not much less Ukraine and Finland and Sweden and all that. Russians realized kind of early on that the United States was deceiving them, and that the United States and NATO was indeed planning on invading Russia in one way or another to steal their resources and to break them up, balkanize them, the way the United States is going right now. These people that are here in D.C. are balkanizing the U.S. too. They're doing the same thing to us. They're doing to Russia just in a different way, or trying to do to Russia just in a different way. When they realized that their equipment and all that, the Russians, were not up to par, they turned around. They still believe some of the nonsense that the U.S. and NATO sent out to them. For instance, the Minsk Accords, where we agreed, NATO and the U.S. and all these people agreed that no, we're not going to make Ukraine into a NATO country. We're not going to arm them on all that. And all we were doing is stalling to, in fact, arm them. So the Russians started realizing that, they're in trouble. So they started to improve their military equipment and training. And that's why I've been able to say, because I've watched this for years now, that's why I've been able to say they're going to kick our ass as they're doing financially right now. Because they haven't been hurt by these sanctions that NATO and the U.S. have put on, not to any great degree. The petrodollar is going down. It just croaked. Yeah. That's why I say look out for these bankings. They're going to steal your money and then say it's your fault, like they always do. Oh, it's like the guns. This guy that shot these people at the school, they're having a hard time with that little narrative because the guy was apparently, not white. I'll just put it that way. But they still run with it. And they say, guns did it, guns did it. So instead of solving the problem, they steal from you. They steal your rights, they steal your treasury, they steal your blood. These people are vampires that run the country. And like I said, there may be a handful of people up there, and that's it. They always say that Putin is such a thug in Russia. Well, it took a strong man, and he was KGB and he was ruthless, but he did it to save his country. He wouldn't put up with the shit that our Congress does, and especially the corporate oligarchs, who we would call the millionaires and billionaires. He went after them. And because he went after those oligarchs who stole out of Russia, who had ties to the United States, now we say that he's a thug and he's a terrible guy. No, he's standing up for his people. Very unlike any of our leaders have done for years. They've sold us down the tube. They've sold us down the toilet and flushed it 2 or 3 times to make sure we're gone. So, what's going to happen next? I've shown you the BMP. Okay? They have tens of thousands of these types of weapons. Armor, personnel carriers, rocket launchers, artillery pieces, air defense, the best in the world. The troops that are probably the best trained in the world today, because they've been actually going through combat now for a year. They've learned their lessons. Don't you think they have? Haven't. They have. We thought that the ground offensive would start now, and it's kind of ramping up. We're seeing what's going on in Bakhmut. You can go listen to History Legends, the channel History Legends. He does a very good job on explaining the tactical situation. There's military summary in those too, but I've looked at that, and the military summary channel, for me, I think is hard for people to follow on the map, especially when he moves it around and you can't really see, the whole picture. History Legends, as I've found, has been the very best one, so go look him up if you don't know who he is. I think he's Eastern European anyway. He might even be, I'm not sure what he is, but he does a very good job. So we thought this ground offensive would happen by now. I know Colonel Douglas McGregor has been expecting it, Scott Ritter and some other people. And we're not seeing the major offensive first. And come about. It's still kind of like shaping the battlefield. And it seems to be taking a long time. In some regards, I was starting to wonder, and I'll admit it, if we weren't in a 1984 situation where maybe things weren't there as even our good commentators could explain. Maybe we were in that situation where we were at war with Oceania and then with East Asia and then with Eurasia. And oh no, now we were at war with them, but no, we were never at war with them. We were really at war with Eurasia. You know how that goes in 1984 if you've ever read it. I was beginning to wonder what in the hell's going on here. But I think I understand. And as I said before, the Russians wanted to make sure that their defensive line was ready so that when they go on the offensive, they're not going to have to protect their rear. Okay, and that's especially given the weapons that are involved and all that. I totally understand, but there's more to it now. We know that the air defenses they've been testing the air defenses of Ukraine now for months and months and months. It's slowly deteriorated, and even if we send systems there now, it's not going to be enough, and it's not going to be integrated enough to make a difference. On the other hand, the Russian air defense system is much superior, excellent. They're even putting it up on their government buildings in Moscow, just as an example. Okay. They use a thing called ISR, which they've been making sure is right before they start moving this mass of combined arms forward. And they're going to have to take out all of Ukraine now, okay, ladies and gentlemen, they're going to have to because of what we've done. And I don't blame them. But no, they have no intention of invading all of Europe and starting a Russian empire. That's not their goal. Their goal is to protect their people, unlike these assholes over here that have no regard for us. The only regard they have for us is what they pretend to have so that you will give them money that they can spend on the military industrial complex, send to other countries where they can launder it and put it back in their pockets. They're thieves, murderers, and liars. So, in my humble estimate of the situation, this is what I think is going to happen. Russia's going to let them bring in all this equipment that they're promised as much as possible. Now, a lot of this isn't going to come in for 6 months to a year, maybe years. That's been promised. A lot of that's to hoodwink the American public and other people into going along with continuing to send money into the military-industrial complex in Ukraine. I understand that. But at the same time, they're going to be bringing in these massive amounts. It's not going to quite be like that, but equipment. And they're going to be manned with NATO people that are now knocked out of their militaries, all right? And they're signed up as mercenaries or as Ukrainians, okay? Regardless, they're going to be Western people and Western trained Ukrainians that what are left. The point is that Russia would just assume that they go ahead and bring this equipment forward and these personnel forward. Not that they want to murder people and kill them, but that there's really no choice at this point. So I've been watching what's happening. Remember, General Surovikin, who was brought in back in the fall for the Russians, took over command of the whole front there, right? And his major concern was two things, which is the same thing that Putin said. Okay, he's going to fortify the air to protect the Donbass, and he's going to grind down the Ukrainian army. In other words, denazify it. Okay, which is exactly what Putin told him to do, what Putin has been talking about the whole time. But Surovikin's an Air Force, an aerospace force general. He controls that, or did. Well, I think we're seeing huge movements of Russian aircraft, bombers, fighters, fuel tankers. They don't have what we do as far as having A-10 Thunderbolts, but they have similar equipment, okay? The point that I'm saying is they're bringing their air forces to line. When the Ukrainians, pushed by NATO and the United States, get properly set up to where the Russians know that that they can unleash hell and destroy the rest of the Ukrainian army, and they'll probably go further west, even west of Kyiv, these air forces. Under the protection of their ISR, which is intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, the entire Russian army moves underneath that umbrella. The air forces will be out of ways, but they'll have other systems that can protect them. What the artillery has only been doing piecemeal over the last year, the Russian artillery, the Russian Air Force and those bombers are going to make mincemeat out of anyone that opposes them. And they'll do it from high altitude, and the Ukrainians won't have any air defenses to take out those aircraft. That's what I'm looking at now. I'm not sure when that's going to happen. If Ukraine is deciding that they're going to do an offensive, a spring offensive, which of course is ludicrous, it's stupid, but if they're dumb enough to do it, the Russians just might wait till then. Okay? And they'll totally destroy Ukraine. Totally. And any NATO that's associated with it. And if Poland's thinking about jumping over the border of Belarus right now, there's a Polish joke. Actually, there are lots of. It used to be Polish jokes were kind of funny, and then when it got to the point where people were told, "Hey, don't do that," that's disrespectful, and so don't make these kind of jokes. But I'm going to tell you, this is what Poland's doing right now. Okay, this is what they're doing. There's a minefield out there in front of them. Do you know what a Polish minesweeper looks like? It's like this. They close their eyes, they plug their ears, and they move forward, stamping on the ground. That's what the dumbass Poles are doing right now. Those poor Polish people. They suffered during World War II great losses. The Russians did. And now the people that caused that, whether you agree, I mean, I know that the Western banking systems, put together World War II, World War I, all of that, the Russian Bolshevik Revolution. I know they did all that because they like to destabilize the world, and then they reap the benefits. It's just the Rothschilds doing the same thing that they've been doing for a long time. Like, back during the Napoleonic Wars at the Battle of Waterloo, when actually the British won, but then the Rothschild goes over and says, "Oh, the British lost," and then he was able to buy everything up on the penny, right? Because everybody was scared then, right? Because he says the British lost instead of Napoleon. Well, they're doing the same thing to us now. They're just stealing us blind. So at any rate, that's where we are, I think, in the war right now. For Milley to say that Russia's been strategically, tactically, politically defeated and is a pariah in the world, that's describing them. But see, they don't care because it's not you they're actually doing this for. It's for themselves. So their little small group, they can see the destruction. They're planning on this destruction of Russia, and then they're going to steal all these resources, just like Bolton has talked about. And Zbigniew Brzezinski, those kinds of people. But it's not going to go that way. They're digging their own graves. As Isaiah said, the pit that you dig for others, you yourself shall fall into. And Russia, as I've said, is the Assyria that's going to punish us. And I'm not sure a lot of us are going to get out of this. Even the good people, I think, are going to be suffering, if not killed, over this thing. So prepare as best you can. And it hurts me. It hurts me greatly. But we have refused as a people to stand up and hold these assholes accountable in the way they should. They throw out there and they say, "Oh, you've got a representative system, so you can't overthrow our government. You can't do that because you voted for it." They trap you into that. But remember, in the Declaration of Independence, it says when a government becomes abusive of these things, it's the right of the people to get a new form of government, and not through the system that they permit, because that one they control. So since we can't do it, because of the way they put us through it, even John F. Kennedy said, you don't let people have a voice of dissent, then it'll cause a civil war. Well, the way they've got the security system set up here now, that's not going to happen. Infraguards everywhere. I ran into a thing here just the other day where these people were spied upon. They weren't doing anything wrong, but they were spied upon, and then false accusations were made against them. The government, specifically the FBI now, doesn't investigate crime. It investigates people, even in their First Amendment rights, even if they've not done anything. I'm really hyped up on this because it really makes me angry. So anyway, that's where we are on that. I expect that there will be a huge air campaign by the Russians to kick off the offensive. It'll make the World War II invasion of D-Day in Europe look like a picnic. Okay, before I get into the next subject, I'm sorry I'm ignoring this, but you see how important all of this is, right? Remember, they're lying to you about everything. The balloons, UFOs, all of that. They don't want you to talk about Nord Stream. They don't want you to talk about, the whole OWS system and all that was trying to do. They don't want you to know about the war on your food supply, which this train wreck in Ohio was partly. They let that go because it's destroyed crops and livestock within 100 miles of there. It's all a war on your food supply, just like I pointed out at Bundy Ranch back in 2014 when I saw the BLM and the federal government do it there. And anybody that stood up against it, they wanted to call them criminals because they're the criminals. They're the mafia, so to speak, the organized crime that's gotten control of our institutions. And now they're trying to also and this is very upsetting. They're trying to ruin the children. And that's when God says that's enough. But before I get to this last thing, which was instigated because of something happened on Twitter today, I want to give you Matthew 18. No, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. This isn't going to be a long spiritual discussion, but I want you to go look at Matthew 18. Again, it goes back to this thing people say, oh, there's no marriage in heaven. Where is the angels in heaven are, but they don't know what the angels in heaven are like. They don't know what the beloved, begotten sons and daughters of God are like in heaven. They've just got what they've been told. Okay? Okay, fine. But here's a problem for all those people. They don't understand what Jesus was saying when he was saying, talking about the man who died and his wife married his brother, and then the Sadducees say, so whose wife is she in the resurrection? He says, no, you misunderstand the scriptures of the power of God, for in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but the angels in heaven. Well, two things there. What are the angels in heaven like? Who's he talking about? What kind of angel? And secondly, those people said that the guy that died was one of them, which was a key as to why he was answering the way he was. But regardless, in Matthew 18, I want you to go read it after we're done here. Matthew 18. And in there are two things that are important. I mean, the whole thing is very good, okay? But there are two things that have to do with our relationships, with our requests to God. Two things. Number one, whenever two or more are gathered in my name or ask in my name, it will be granted. What you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and what you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. All right? Those two things. So what I'm telling you is, when there are, as I was saying the other day, what you're looking for is for God to sanctify your righteous choices. They may not be like everybody else's. You may be an apple tree. You may be a cherry tree. You may be an olive tree. You're not expected to have the same fruit, but you're expected to be righteous with it. And if you are that, and there are two or more of you that are gathered in that righteous situation, this says that you can bind on earth, and it'll be bound in heaven. And what's bound in heaven is eternal. Man and a woman, what God has joined together, let no man put asunder. And I can guarantee you that what two people agree to here in righteousness, and they love each other and all of that, and they want to be together, God's not going to say, oh, no, there's no male and female up here. Sorry, you can't have that. That's not going to go like that. That's not what the promise is, if you believe biblical scripture. We can get into Bhagavad Gita and the Eastern religions and all that, and it's definitely different. I mean, as far as, they'll say that, you're just a glob up there, a drop in an ocean, no consciousness and all that, you become part of nirvana. But they also respect the man-woman relationship. That they do. Okay. Matthew 18, just go read it. Consider what that's saying, that if you love your wife, you love your husband, and you all agree that you want to be together, not here, but forever, bind in earth and in heaven, says that that'll be done. Okay. Where I'm going to end on this, and I'm not sure we're going to get to, because I'm going to lose the internet here. All the kids come home here any minute. And I mean in the whole neighborhood, and I lose the internet. Let me take a swig of water here real quick. This morning I saw on Twitter, an exchange going on between some people about climate change. And there was this one individual, and then another one joined later, who was on the side that, oh yeah, there's climate change and the earth is warming and you don't know the science, you're denying the science and all. And they were making these accusations against this other person. And I had to step in. I shouldn't have, but I did. And I just basically told them that, again, that CO2 is part of the life cycle. I'm really cutting this down as to what I said. And I said that all the CO2 that mankind and all of the things that he's done in the Industrial Revolution since the late 1800s doesn't match what one volcano puts out. And then they came back and said, well, CO2 hurts plants if there's too much of it. They can't they can't produce. And they missed the point that we're way below the levels of when these plants were thriving back to 300 years ago. As a matter of fact, we had lower carbon dioxide carbon dioxide at other times in our history than we do now. But this person wanted to get argumentative, and like I've told a lot of people, I don't do dissertations on Twitter. I did a little thread there, and then I said, I'm done with you. If anybody else wants to take this over, you can. But I want to address this. This climate change nonsense, along with the disease nonsense, all that stuff, and all the other things that are going on are designed to subjugate you. And these people that if they get on board honestly because they're concerned about climate change, they've been deluded, they've been fooled, they've been deceived to go along with the destruction of mankind as a whole. And a lot of them say that's what they want anyway. There are too many people. Well, I suggest they take a gun and blow their own brains out first. That'll probably get me in trouble too. My wife, Carol, I've talked about her many, many times. You know what? I'm going to show you a picture of her again. I just can't help myself, you know? I just can't help myself. This is slightly different. I don't know if I've ever shown you this one before. This was the day, or within a couple of days of when we were married. Okay, there she is. Carol was a Democrat. I was a nothing, really. I'd run as a libertarian to run for sheriff back in the 80s. But I've always kind of gone for, you know, who I think will do the best job. I wasn't much into parties. But she was pretty much a committed Democrat. But she was a constitutional type who believed in the Bill of Rights, the rights of individuals. She might think the government can solve problems, but she wasn't talking about interfering with people's God-given rights. Okay? And she offered a balance to me where I could bounce things off of her. And we had, like I've told you before, I think we had 2 spats in our whole marriage. And she was right both times. I'll admit it. I'll admit it. All right. One of those was about this subject. In about 1998, somewhere in there, 97, somewhere in there, 98, 99, somewhere in there, Al Gore came out with his book, An Inconvenient Truth. And it was about global warming is really what it was about. He didn't even use the subject of climate change there. And in there, he had all this scientific information, just like this person on Twitter did, who was using sources that are funded, have grants given to them by the very corporations and government entities that want that information to say that there is climate change so they can take power, take your money. It's fascism to the highest degree. So Al Gore had all this information in An Inconvenient Truth, and by his standards, we were going to lose the Arctic ice by, what was it, 2013? Denied that solar activity has anything to do with our climate. Said that CO2 was a greenhouse gas when it's actually one of the 4 foundations of life on Earth, and I've talked about that before: oxygen, CO2, water, and sunlight, which, by the way, they want to block the sunlight, and now they're polluting the water to a greater extent, and they want to kill off and stop CO2, which gives plants the ability to breathe and do photosynthesis, including oxygen for you to breathe. This is a war on us, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said in a video sometime back, 3 or 4 back, there's a war on mankind. And these idiots that support this nonsense, including government officials, even in Congress, they've either been paid off and have promised a place at the table when everybody else is dead, or they're just plain stupid. So Al Gore wrote that, and Carol and I argued about that. Not badly. I mean, it was a civil, thing. And she's a smart lady. You don't just come up and say something to her that you can't back up. So she held me to the point. But that's when I learned how serious this. And by the way, she didn't win that argument. Because I said she won both times. In this situation, we just came to an agreement. Okay. What I learned is how insidious this whole process is and what they're really about. And if Carol had lived, Sorry about that. If Carol had lived, I'm going to get rid of that. Sorry. I should turn that off, but I never do. If Carol had lived, she would have known in the end that I was right. Because she would have seen how things progressed and how the attacks would be made on individuals. So Al Gore's entire book, An Inconvenient Truth, they made a movie about it too, by the way, was all lies, was all presumptions, was all to fill the pockets of Al Gore and his cronies, which they're still trying to do today, and which they've been quite successful at doing. The next thing I want to bring up, in that same regard, is the British. I think he's British. Nature commentator David Attenborough. Same thing. Same bullshit stuff put out that Al Gore was doing. So why am I bringing this up? Because this person said I don't understand the science, that I'm a science denier. No, you look at your science as a religion, not using the science, which isn't science, it is religion. You're using science as a religion, and you're not applying the scientific method of skepticism and of repeatability, which the climate deniers do deny. I'm sorry, which the climate promoters do deny. Okay? So that happened on Twitter this morning. It was pretty ugly. I finally handed it over to others because I had too many things that I needed to get involved in. Getting ready for this, by the way, listening to some briefings and looking at the map and trying to figure out what actually is going on in the Russian mind. I'm not saying I absolutely know, but I do know that they're planning a bombing campaign, not an artillery campaign. Artillery as well, but the bombing campaign is going to be the big destroyer coming up, and then the land forces will just clean up behind the bombing campaign. That's what we're looking at, I think. And it's going to go further than the Donbass. The Russians have to. They can't allow long-range missiles to be placed close enough to the Russian border to go into Russian territory. And these bastards here, Newland, Bolton, Biden, Blinken, Sullivan, and all those neocons that back them up, they're responsible for all the death and destruction that you're seeing now. Now they're planning on, as they lose Ukraine, to move it all over to China. Evil, evil people. Okay. Wide and awake. Find a place for us all to come to be together. You mean like a meeting, or do you mean like forever during this whole thing that we're going to be going through? I don't think everybody could come to one place. I think you're going to have to look at your situation, and if you don't move now to a place where you can hole up, have supplies and all that, the one that you can is going to have to be within 3 days walking distance of your home, because you won't be able to get there by car. 3 days walking distance maximum. Otherwise, I'd be. If anybody wants to get a hold of me on Twitter, you can send me a note. I don't check my DMs, message requests, but I'll look at the notifications. And if you send me, hey, if you see one of my tweets and you answer it, and you respond to it, and you say, hey, we'd like to get together with you at this place here, this place there. In Utah is the best thing, because there's nothing in Wyoming worth going to, frankly. The Suds in Evanston is good, but it wouldn't fit for a conversation like we'd have. The break, both in Murray, which I've talked about, you've seen it. I've shown you some music that was being played there, or the break at Daybreak in South Jordan. They have an area where private parties can go, and it's still a little loud. You have the sports on, the music and stuff on the disco and all that, or the jukebox, but you could still visit and talk in that. Fairly large group of people too. especially the one in Murray. It has a whole upstairs area with a separate bar, where we could sit and talk. So just let me know. I'm not going to set it up for a lot of reasons. Okay, I'm just not going to do it. Not that I object to that. It's just that you know I know the people that run those two locations. They're actually friends of mine now. I've known them for so many years. And if I asked to reserve the party area, they would do it and not even charge me. Okay. So I'm willing to do that, but I'm not going to do it when only two people are going to show up. Yeah, just not going to do it. Not that I disrespect even two people, but it's just putting the place the break at odds. That would be difficult. D-Man, 3 days just became the party pooper reality comment. Yeah, 3 days walking distance. Now, if you see things starting to happen and you've got your trailer loaded up and all that, and you can head out of town before the big problem hits, you're fine. 3 days walking, you figure 3 days driving max, right? 3 days, 3 hours driving, right? 3 hours driving, 3 days walk. That's basically what we're talking about. And it's not quite that way, but that's the easiest way to think about it. Okay. You think they all pulled out over a burning Quran in Sweden? Pulled out of where? Are you talking to somebody else there? You think they all pulled out over a burning Quran in Sweden? I know that happens up there. See, the governments don't care about their own people anymore. This replacement immigration is a real deal, and they are trying to do that. I told you they're emptying out Ukraine of white Christians. That's exactly what's going on there. Along with, of course, laundering money and the labs that we found, all that other stuff. No, it's all real. I'm not going to get into that subject, but it's obvious for anybody who has eyes to see and ears to hear. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. David Gordon, that is the problem. You can't carry much, only what's on your back. And that's kind of funny because what do the scriptures say? You're not going to be able to return to your house and get anything. You're going to have to leave and go to the hills with what you can carry. Yep, I know. That's why it'd be nice if you could. But I'd rather take my chances. It depends on where you are. Some towns, you could probably stay put without too much trouble, especially if you have neighbors you can depend upon. But places like New York, St. Louis, New Orleans, Chicago, Los Angeles, Portland, Seattle, I wouldn't want to be there. No, thank you. Oh, and Turkey. Oh, is that what you're talking about? They pulled out. I'm not sure. I have to look at that. They're going to try to overthrow Erdogan, and then you have Samantha Powers in Hungary who wants to overthrow Orban. It's all it's to help the. I thought this was funny. I put this out on Twitter this morning too. The independent media. They're there to try to promote independent media. Whoa, 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 whoa! What do they do to independent media in this country, or in Western Europe, or in Australia, or in New Zealand? They try to shut you down. They try to censor you. Oh, but we're going to promote independent media in Hungary. Why? Because their independent media will set up to overthrow the government. It's an op by these bastards up here, and they are bastards. Oh, by the way, I got to tell you, this was kind of interesting. I have a daughter that's very much into genealogy, and I think I've told you before that she's tracked us. I know I'm going to upset Christians here, but I've mentioned this before. She's tracked us all the way back to the individual that you would know as Jesus Christ. I know, but oh no, he didn't have kids. Okay, I've already talked about that. But she's got the genealogy, and it was pretty cool. Well, she's done a lot more of the branches that come out of that. Man, I can't believe it. I'm related to Thomas Jefferson, John Adams. Wow, I had no idea. I did some genealogy, and I did a direct line. I think I got back to about 900 AD, somewhere in there. I'm related to William the Conqueror. Not, I'm not related to William the Conqueror, but we were there when he came over into Britain. We're actually Vikings. My family, the Potter side, that's actually a Viking name, which is kind of interesting. A lot of people thought it was British, but it's not, or possibly French. It's not. It's Viking. Okay, which is what William the Conqueror was. William the Conqueror was a Norseman, right? He was they're on Normandy, the Normandy area of France, just meant that it was inhabited by Normans, by the North people. Yeah. Okay. Okay, you guys are talking about places that are safe, like the Adirondacks, etc. And of course, we know about the Smoky Mountains. A lot of my friends have gone to that area of Tennessee, for instance. Okay. We are all just three people away from Kevin Bacon. Oh, in that new series, I haven't watched that, by the way, a new movie or whatever it is that he's in. I've seen clips of it, but I don't watch those things very much. Yeah, that's right, Mark. Nairn, we are now 7 years behind in the production of javelins, and that was the point that Colonel McGregor makes. Scott Ritter, Alexander Mercouris, a lot of these people. Uh, they show how the United States and NATO in general, there's no way they can ramp up the military production uh, to beat Russia. We've lost. Who has lost strategic? As I said at the beginning of this, who has lost strategically, tactically, politically, financially? They've lost the industrial and financial war already. And they're just trying to keep you from knowing about it so that they can rip you off a little more and prepare their places for them. Okay. Oh, I'd love to be in the Ozarks. I have a friend that lives in Arkansas. Actually, I have three friends that live in Arkansas, and they're not far from the Ozarks. I think they have a place in the Ozarks that they can run to. Yeah. All right. Bet Canada's Prime Minister Blackface will be out of office soon. Yeah, but the way things are rigged, they'll get somebody else in there that'll be just as much like him. Until, and I'm not calling for violence here, but until these people reap the rewards of their evil, they're not going to change. Okay. I'm going to run back to the beginning of the chat here, and I won't be able to go all the way back, but I just want to see if I've got anybody that's sitting. You still haven't seen Elijah Reka Holick. It could be an individual, but I think it's the spirit of Elijah. And we see pockets of that happening now. I think we're seeing it in Russia. It's being suppressed in the United States, that spirit. The spirit of Christ is almost the same thing. As a matter of fact, in some ways, it could be the same thing. We see it in different places around the world, least of all here, unfortunately. Pastor Baldwin, by the way, I have a lot of respect for Pastor Chuck Baldwin. No, we don't agree all the time. I respect where he is. He's spent his whole life studying as a scholar and all that, I understand. And Dr. Michael Heiser. Those have been my two go-tos for years. Well, Dr. Michael Heiser only for about maybe 3 years now when I found out about him. But of course, he is very, very bad off if he hasn't died already. God bless him and his family. But apparently, the Liberty Fellowship that Chuck Baldwin does up in Montana is being evicted from their church place. And it was really funny how this came about. Not funny, tragic, really, because of who they are and what they do. They speak the truth. They talk about freedom. They talk about liberty. They talk about the evil that's in this place here. And even in the state of Montana, they got a notice that their rent was going to be raised 2.5 times. In other words, if they were paying, let's just say, if they were paying $1,000 a month for the building, it was going to be $2,500. And they knew what it was when they saw it. They figured that they'd make that the people that were doing that wanted them out, and that they thought if they raised the rent that high, that they would leave voluntarily. Well, Chuck paid the $2,500 or whatever it was, the 2.5 times the regular rent, which is not what the company wanted. They wanted them out of there. And I think this has something to do with some people in the legislature and maybe even the governor of Montana. But at any rate, so since they paid the rent, then the company took it to the next step, and they issued an eviction notice, I guess just this last week, telling them that they have to be out by March 1st. I don't think that's legal, but I don't think Chuck is going to fight it. I think he's just going to let it go, and they'll find another place. But you see what you're up against. Not to mention the fact that if you stand up for morality, real morality now, you're considered talking hate speech. And that's how the FBI gets around all the stuff that they're doing to the Catholics. Oh, it's hate speech. Remember Merrick Garland? We don't like violence. Violence is now saying that you don't agree with something. If you don't agree with them, you're doing hate speech. It's evil, ladies and gentlemen, evil. So anyway, Elijah, I think, is more a spirit. I'm not saying the guy won't show up or somebody that is Elijah, but I think it's the spirit of Elijah that you need to pay attention to more than anything else, okay? And the spirit of Christ, the Christ spirit. And people say, well, that's New Age, that. No. Yeah, poor children mutilated and grandma told to end. Yeah, the laptop information. Yeah, see how the FBI suppressed that. Serious criminal, treasonous behavior, and the FBI just hang on to it. They're a criminal syndicate, a protection racket, ladies and gentlemen. They're not a law enforcement agency. They're a criminal protection syndicate. And anybody in the FBI who's not speaking out or turning in their badge and their gun, or at least trying to make a difference at the risk of their career, they're complicit. I don't give a damn what they say. Okay. Yeah, that was the other thing. Big Text brings this out. Yeah, they claim they burned the tank cars so they could get the tracks reopened faster. Well, it definitely is a Chernobyl type of pollution in the area. It's not radioactive, but it's definitely poisonous. It's been killing livestock, making people sick. And the big thing is here, like the Nord Stream blow up, where are all the green people? Where are all the climate change people? Where are all the EPA people yelling and screaming? No, this was permitted by the powers that be that control those people, and they're staying quiet because it fits with the overall plan to reduce mankind on the earth. Go look at the thing that shows that there's going to be a population decline by like 2/3 in the United States by 2025. Deagle.com. Yeah, and that's they're on course for that, and they're going to do anything else, including starting some kind of war. I mean, you're going to have forward operations forces if the U.S. and NATO keep pushing this. Some of these things that are happening to our food supply might not be by our government, but they don't care because it's still coming after us, or the train derailments, or the communications facilities, or what. These could be done by forward operating groups, special operations of China or Russia. Who knows? My gut feeling is it's our own people because they're always doing this stuff, and they use that as an excuse to do these other things. But still, the end result is the same. Where does it say that in the Bible? What? Matthew 18? Go look it up. Go look at Matthew 18. Like, if you're talking to me, Taylor Pendleton, go look at that in Matthew 18. It's right there. If you're talking to me about the thing I was saying about sealing on earth and in heaven and all that. Roy, you need to be oiled. Are you saying I need some scotch? Hey, how do you know I'm not going to have some here in a few minutes? By the way, the other disagreement that Carol and I had, I might as well tell you what it is. The other disagreement that Carol and I had, I can't give you all of the details about it, but it was about my lamenting what one of my former wives was doing to me. And I was trying to fix it, and it wasn't fixable. And she was right about that. That was the other thing. Just so you know, very wise lady, loyal, loving, smart, beautiful. Oh my gosh, the pictures don't do her justice. She had a combination of. Here you go. You got me talking about it. She was a combination of, if you know who Jane Mansfield was, if you know who Jane Mansfield was and Marilyn Monroe, if you combine those two, that was Carol. So anyway, that was the other big argument that we had, that she turned out to be right. And although she wasn't totally right on the thing about the climate thing with an inconvenient truth, I suspended my argument until I got further information. Like I said, if she had lived, she would have gone with me. So that's it. Okay. No, read Revelation 19:22. What? I shouldn't even do this because it takes time for everybody else. Why don't you just tell us what it says? It's not like I can pull this stuff out of the top of my head. 1922. And I'm going to tell you again, if you're not getting it in the original language, and if you're not bouncing it off Torah and off James, I'm not gonna give much to you. 1922. Let's see what it says. Oh, okay. You're talking to somebody else. By the way, that's another thing that came up here not too long ago. The idea of preterism. I had a question on Twitter because Chuck Baldwin gave a sermon about preterism, about the Revelation was probably fulfilled at the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD. And I agree with that. But I also pointed out that even though that's preterist, and I agree with it, there are still aspects of prophecy that repeat, that are in the circular repetition, types and shadows. And so things like the pharmakia that they would deceive the earth with, well, nothing like that existed in the first century, not to that extent. So Revelation, while it has primarily preterist concepts that it was fulfilled in 70 AD, it still has type and shadow repetition that we can look at in the future of the types and shadows. Okay, I got to go. I can see that I'm going to lose the internet. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I wanted to hit that up real quick today. Keep your eyes on the horizon, your ears to the ground. Keep your situational awareness on high, and make sure that you pray, and stay out of the way. Okay. I guess I should say one other thing, since I'm seeing questions about Carol and about my dating situation. As I said the other day, I don't go up and talk to a lady because I expect her to go home with me that day and do the thing. That's not what I'm looking for. It's to see what the reaction is. Normally, I get a good reaction. It's after they do a little investigation that like I was saying, that my reputation precedes me to some extent. And because they don't understand the ramifications of all that, it's just easy to say, right? Thank you all for being here. So I thought I'd just mention that. I don't go on to dating sites or anything like that. It's too risky. I don't want to mess with honeypots and have them cause me problems on the dating site. So I just don't do that. Then I had some people ask me, how come I give my cards out. I saw this on a comment the other day. How come I give my cards out, but I won't talk to women that are showing interest on my YouTube or Twitter channels? Like I said, long distance relationships, and some of them said, hey, we'd move to where you are. Yeah, no, that's too risky. You don't really know me that well, even though what you see here is what I am. But then how do we really know we're compatible? No, it takes some time, and to make that drastic of a change when you might be leaving your family behind or whatever, it's just not good. The other thing is I have experimented with that. I have taken trips of people that have women that have contacted me, and I've made trips to see them, and believe me, it was a disaster. I don't mean to say anything mean or nasty, but it just wouldn't work. I don't expect a woman to be like this lady, but I expect sanity, affection, honesty, cleanliness. I'll say a lot of other things. not prudish, not telling me, doing the Jesus freak stuff all day. I mean, I know a lot about the subject matter. Nobody needs to tell me, that I need to look at it this way or that way or whatever. No thanks. And I'll end on this because it kind of goes with Matthew 18. You'll be told by people that you need to join this denomination, this church, or believe this way or believe that way. Be it that you have to accept Jesus Christ as your Savior or whatever, or that you have to follow Buddha. I don't know, all those things. This is what I would say really works. It's not appreciated because then you're not going along with somebody else's dogma and doctrine. And some people would say this isn't what you're told to do. You're told to join the community, to join each other in a church relationship. Well, you can do that without going to a brick and mortar place. You can, talk about that with friends and family. That's still the same thing. But the best way to find God is to fast. You decide how long, and to go out alone and go to the woods, go hiking up in a mountain, go out to a lake, spend some time listening to the still small voice. There is no church that will give you the results that will. And with that, adieu. Till next time, out here.